Greetings! Welcome to Terra Prime Live. Darth Anonymous coming to you from Terra Prime. Beautiful day out here today, so we're outside. Joining us here on the panel for our weekly saber discussion, we've got two of our learners in exile apprentices. We all know them, Eric and Gary, or Iraq and Darth Orcanis. So welcome, gentlemen, to the panel. Today we're going to be talking about form versus function, or form. What's the difference? How they relate? You know, and I think it's spurred on mostly by one of the common questions we get when we're putting out Dulan or exercises or something like that, and people say, "Oh, well, why are you doing this? Because doesn't it leave you open here? Or you would never do that in combat, and so why would you train it and all that?" So hopefully we'll address some of the more common of those, and then continue on to see if there's any questions from out there. So yes. Oh, and joining us here on the program, we got Chris Garvey. How you doing, Chris?
Doing all right. Got a nice sunny day in the Pacific Northwest, so can't complain.
Excellent, excellent. We have the same here. I know other people do not, so we feel for you. But we here in the Midwest, we paid for it this winter, so we deserve this. Anyway, so yes, right on to it. So what's the relationship between form and function? A lot of times you're going to see our Dulans, or forms, or a kata, or whatever you want to call them, and there's going to be movements in them that seem odd or abstracted. Sometimes it's difficult to tell what they're for. Low stances, crouching, spins, turns, manipulations of the blade behind your back, you know, all of these kinds of things that a lot of people at first glance may assume that's, you know, really, really terrible to do. And it's not necessarily bad if you know what you're doing with it. And we'll show you the relationship here between what we do in a form, or what a form is supposed to do for you, because there's other things that these sets will do for you. It's not just you're going to be training a set of combinations to use in combat, and they're going to be able to be used as a blueprint for what you're going to do in your responses, because in real fighting and in sparring and all of that, whatever you're doing, it's going to be uncooperative, so you're not going to have the benefit of knowing what the other person is going to do in advance, and it'll be completely chaotic. So all your planning will pretty much go right out the window as soon as the match begins. So when we talk about form, it's going to benefit us in obviously a combat way, but it's also going to benefit us cardiovascularly because it's an exercise. We've talked about this before. Most forms tend to be about the length of an average engagement, so that's interesting to do. It trains a burst kind of cardio type of thing. There's obviously biomechanical stuff that we'll go into that a lot of these exercises train just in case the event comes up. So yeah, so that's what we'll be kind of going through today. And so why don't I start out? Does anybody have any questions or comments to start us out with, or before we begin? Not really? Okay. So let's see. Probably the number one complaint, not complaint, I should say criticism that that a lot of the sabering gets is probably directed, and a lot of argument is directed towards the usefulness of spinning the saber around, or doing what we call the orbits. And the interesting thing about the orbits is that they have both of those biomechanical and kind of combat applications. but oftentimes they're not really obvious. Okay, so when we're talking about the orbits, we're talking about these things here, the spinning of the saber that you see done all the time, and it's a lot of fun. We've done an entire show on it, so we've talked about this ad nauseum. And then of course this behind the back thing. Now what we're calling these here is a precession, like a precession of an orbit, right? For obvious reasons here. Okay. Now the reason this is a good developmental exercise is because if you look at the positions that my hand is getting into, and this is why we're always telling people don't let the wrist break, don't let go of the saber, because each of these positions right here is a potential parry, a potential strike, guard, something like that. Okay, so every time you're spinning like this, you're essentially mapping out trajectories that your body can take this saber to go from one position up here to another position down here, right? And there's lots of things that can happen from point A to point B. So if I'm here and I go here, we see strikes, we see parries, we see all kinds of things that kind of lend themselves to it. So that when at any point as I'm going around this rotation, if I stopped for a parry, I would be able to effectively parry. Now that doesn't mean I have to block it, you know, and it's going to come in on me. I can move right through it because the force kind of brushing up against it is going to deflect the other person's weapon a lot of times. So that's probably one of the biggest reasons why you would do this. The other reason you would do this, and this comes in with the turning around and the full processions, as we'll call them. There'll be a video, of course, coming for these. But is when we are in some sort of combat situation, we're in a three-dimensional space, right? And oftentimes, what will happen is you will see two people come crashing together, and then they will pass each other, right? And in that pass, right, you have to turn. Your blade may be moving. Somebody may be forcing it down, like throwing a strike this way, and it starts going this way. So I move it here like this. If I know how this rotation and my body are related and connected in all these different angles, it doesn't matter at what point I catch this particular parry. If I parry low with one hand and they force this blade behind my back, right, as they come through here, well, obviously we can either turn around that way or turn around that way, okay? But if we don't practice turning around from this point, getting into that, getting out of it, right, turning around and starting to combine it with other things, when it comes up in actual fighting, we may not mechanically be able to do it so well, and we may injure ourselves. Tendinitis in the shoulder, wrist, fingers, all of this kind of thing. So when we advise people to begin with these guys right here, we're really talking about a physical type of thing where we're trying to train motion here up in the upper shoulder. If I go this way, you can kind of see I kind of stay on a very narrow plane, right? I can let the saber loose like this, you see, and it has that much give, okay, just by doing that. I do not have to let go with this, and I don't have to bend my wrist back, all right? We want to try to focus the movement in the shoulder and the hips and all of that kind of thing so that when it comes out, yeah, sure, we're not necessarily going to come in spinning around at people, and of course the way it's done in the Star Wars movies is just a tad ridiculous, where it's just really arbitrary. You know, they beam, 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 and then they do one of these, and then boom, 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 and then they do one of these. Right? There's really no purpose for them doing that in the first place. So yeah, you're unlikely to see that happening in a full contact, honest to goodness sparring match. However, you will see all of these positions. Now, if we look at spinning and we say, well, that's obviously Suresu, so we, if I just want to do spinning, maybe I should just do Suresu. Okay? Sure, you can. In our system, our Suresu is going to be informed by the Shicho, and I'll show you how. In the beginning, we do things like the honor sash, and I'll change the camera here in a moment, but so we can get a bigger field of view here. But as I come around like this, if I stay in one place and I come around this way, and I come around this way, okay, I'm kind of doing a horizontal orbit, like in Suresu. But if I go up here from high guard, kind of come down this way, and then just this way. So I can come here, here, here. Right? So that end with the size. So this, this, this. And if I go here towards the camera, you see that same kind of wide thing there, right? If I can get this right here, then all of a sudden, this is a little bit easier. To illustrate, I will show you with a long hilt right here, so you can see how far my hands are apart. And the thing is that the developmental exercises of spinning that I've put in most of the videos, a lot of it comes from stick work, not sword work. So if I'm here and I hold the stick in this, or the hilt like this, right? And I come through here and I tuck this underneath my elbow, right? Like that. If I switch my hands, do it here, there. And then all of a sudden, I have that behind the backspin that is so popular. Right? In reality, what I'm doing is I'm tucking it underneath. Right? So I could hold it like this, with it out like that. Right? And then I just bring my hands together. There. Now, what use does it have in combat is, as I was saying, when you have pressure being put on the blade, somebody carries it, somebody forces it into this way, you get into the bind of somebody, right? You want this to come around like that. Straight through it. All right. So, questions? Nothing? Okay, well.
Can I just ask one thing? It's just occurred to me. You use two different lengths of hilt. I mean, from a sort of a function point of view, do you see an advantage to practicing with hilts of a different length? Or do you think it's better to sort of have one length and get used to that for this kind of thing?
I don't know. Can you still hear me? There's a lawnmower guy over here.
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Can you still hear me all right? Because I cannot hear anything.
Yeah, can still hear you.
Okay. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, I was just asking. I mean, you were demonstrating that with hilts of two different lengths. Do you think it's an advantage to practice with different lengths, or to get used to just using one length first?
I think simple is better. I think people try to overcomplicate training way too much, and it leads to frustration, and then quitting. So Get something first and get it down, right? There's really no difference mechanically speaking, right? So if I'm like this, right, I can still do this. I could also grab the blade like this, just to train it, right? Thusly, you know. So that would be my advice, is always keep it simple, especially when you're beginning, right? Keep it as simple as you can. Do like one here, one there, then learn how to connect them. Then, you know, kind of get it in there, because you are throwing around an object, and your shoulder is a delicate joint, so it is definitely very prone to overuse injury, very prone to a lot of things. So be real careful, and that's also one of the things that this does train. Biomechanically, we'll go into it here. We want to make sure that as we are doing this, again, we're not letting go here. We're not really breaking the wrist like this. We're coming down like this and accommodating it with the shoulder, right? So if I'm here, the elbow comes this way, right? The more I bring the elbow this way, the closer the blade gets to my body, right? And that, of course, is one of those, you know, canonical Wikipedia things that, you know, you're supposed to be wielding this really close to the body, right? Get used to that, because that's really, really important. We always want to remember that this is front, right? So that when we're doing this, we're going to the sides here, right? This is not front, right? That would be front if I'm facing this way, right? The reason you don't want to do that is because if I'm here like this, doing it correctly here, even, I'll just do the simple one here, right? You can see that my blade doesn't really travel far from my body, right? On the other hand, if I'm like this, you can see that when I do one circle, my arm goes all the way over to here and then has to come all the way back, so I've got this large X right here, right? So that means open, 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 closed, open, 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 closed, open, 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 closed. So we want to stay nice here, so that we have these little openings, but they're very small, right? And I'm opening them and closing them very, very quickly, if that makes sense. Are we pretty good with that?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. The other thing you want to make sure of is you don't want to shrug your shoulder, right? So as I'm going like this, I don't want to shrug it. I don't want to shrug it back here, right? I want to stay upright, so I don't want to kind of punch forward when I come like this, right? These are all these like tiny little things that we want to get. As I'm doing here, I want to keep my knees still. I don't want to see this, right? I want to move my upper body, but I want to move it very little, right? So I'm getting maximum efficiency out of it. A lot of people say that the Doolan or doing the spinning is not efficient, and that's why it shouldn't be in race or whatever. And the thing about it is that what you're trying to do is build up an efficiency so that I can move in small ways in lots of places in my body and affect an enormous movement in the weapon. That way I can use minimal effort for maximum effect. And that's the whole point of that economy of motion that we're thinking of. Economy of motion does not necessarily mean a lack of motion, right? It just means a fine-tuning of it, right? So biomechanically, that's all that stuff. Now, this stuff is trained here. If we go here and we come up like this, if we just don't go around our head, there it is again. right? See? So the movements are all the same, right? The while one might be really, really big, the other one is going to be is going to be a little bit smaller, so it's going to look a lot differently. It's going to look tighter, so it's going to look a little bit faster, right? And it is a little bit faster because you're dealing with you know, smaller logistical space. So there we go. Okay, let's see. So questions, comments so far?
Well, earlier you connected it to Shicho, and but one thing that came to my mind was in Makashi, some of the parries, and you could go to a repose, and that's just another orbit.
Right. Yep. Exactly. If we go into that, we have our guards right here. I can do an orbit into each guard, and depending on where I do that, that's going to be an attack. It's going to be a parry. It's going to be something, right? But it's that same motion with the wrist. Therefore, I certainly don't want to, in Makashi, when I'm doing lots of quick motions like this, ever want to let go. Because if I do that, they actually are probably contacting my blade a lot and with a significant amount of force and leverage if they're doing it up here at the whip, right? Which is just going to pull it right out of my hand. So yeah, so very good observation on that one. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Eric.
Ah, good. My mute button does work. Sorry. I was wondering, we often see the, I guess, the choreography version of that, what we were just kind of mentioning there. Where you said a good amount of leverage was needed to hit the blade, where would you recommend striking a blade for an opponent doing this to you? They were sparring somebody and they started pulling up the old choreography technique. Would you just have to just hit it, or would you recommend a place on the blade to do that?
It's, again, difficult for me to hear, but I think I got it. Yeah, no, if somebody starts doing that, and, you know, like, I don't know, like, coming at you like this or whatever, campers do that all the time, and I think we have footage of one trying it with one of our regular Padawans, and this is all he did, and it was over, right? Because as I was saying, when people are standing like this, open, 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 so it becomes very, very easy just to wait till they're in the middle of a rotation and then get them, because that is the disadvantage to an orbit. An orbit is a big arc, so it can be thought of and predicted, if that makes any sense. Okay, so we'll go on here with low. I would say low stances is probably another one, because in a couple of the Dulan, come down like this, right? And we're way down at the ground, here like this. And I remember a direct question of it. It's like, and it, you know, it was pretty funny. It was like, what are you fighting? Grass. Like, well, okay, sure, I get it, but what if they're coming uphill? What if they're climbing over a wall? Right? What if you're in a different, you know, position than they? What if you're ducking one of their strikes? What if your target is their feet? I mean, there's a million and one possibilities of why you would want to get down that low. We'll be coming out with a training hall episode soon about the use of the Sarlacc sweep, and this is going to come up in it. So we'll watch for that. But so if I duck, right, I have to be able to go down and come back up very, very easily. Otherwise, I'm going to be at a significant disadvantage because I'm going to be less mobile, right? Now, that's not to say that there isn't a way that you can fight with a weapon from the ground and from a low stance. There was an entire style of martial arts, I believe in the Ukraine, where people would fight with little bucklers, and they would fight in full crouches like this and just go at it. So, you know, it's not without its precedent. Yeah, so that would be the basics of the kind of like the low crouching stances. The other thing about low crouching stances is we always want to remember that we want to sink while while we're doing activity, especially if we're fighting, right? Because if we're fighting, right, we're going to have a tendency to rise up, right? And what we want to do is always sink, right? So that when we reach our ready positions, whether it be high-low guard, anything like this, right? My center is low. I can move it. I'm balanced. I can react to whatever kind of comes my way, and that way. One of the hardest things to keep up as you age is a crouch, is getting down. You know, look at how many seniors have problems just getting in and out of chairs, you know, let alone getting up and down off of the floor, right? So I know we've done things like with the Turkish get up before, and we'll probably do more episodes in the fitness, but that is one of the fitness aspects of it, getting those low stances and all of that. Sure, again, will you necessarily go that low? You know, in real combat, maybe not, right? Probably not. You know, it's not common. It's more common probably in a battlefield or a more chaotic situation. You know, but it's a technique which does have validity and can offer different things if you know what you're doing with it. So if you know that you can duck and you can do that, and you have these particular movements, you know, even adding them into a choreography or to a show or something like that will hopefully lend it a little bit of authenticity and a little bit of drama. So, yeah. Now, obviously, when you go down that low, if you're on the same level as the other person, you have to watch out and guard your head, right? That's obviously the big concern. If you notice, like here, when I come down this low and I'm crouching here, coming behind the back is not uncommon as well, because, again, protecting that neck, somebody trying to take the head. And if you watched the other training hall that we had, that was something that we talked about, bringing the sword behind the back. Well, we can just transition right into that one here, because that kind of relates the same way that the low stances do. A lot of times what people do, and this also goes for spinning around, like all this, is they assume that it's single combat guy is right in front of you, right? It also assumes that that guy is going to remain in front of you the whole time. And as we said, people turn around all the time. Maybe their footwork is amazing and they've gotten the drop on you, and all of a sudden they're behind your back. So now you have to be able to spin around. Spinning around like that isn't easy. You lose equilibrium, you lose your focus, you lose a lot of stuff. So practicing it, getting all of your being kind of used to doing those motions, doing them quick, being able to gather themselves right after, recover after it very quickly, is going to benefit you, not necessarily in a specific way, but in more of a global way. So it's going to improve the effectiveness of what you already have, rather than necessarily being a technique in and of itself. Now, I know there are certain things that you can do, like spinning. If I'm up like this, and I go around like this, yeah, sure, I can do that. I can come here, right? And that looks really, really nice, and that's why we put it in movies and stuff like that. Does it have a whole lot of application in a ring or something like that? Not really, because there are way simpler things to do. That if you succeed in blocking at this parry, either on this side or this side, there are easier things that you can do to make that successful. Okay. Any questions or anything?
I suppose a follow-on to the low stances would be instances of standing on one leg. So, you know, I mean, an obvious advantage of practicing that would be balance. So, I mean, what else would you consider to be a useful attribute of practicing instances of standing on one leg?
Well, first of all, there's weight distribution, right? So if I'm like this, let's say that we've got something going on here with the knees as we're going through something like this. So we've got kind of loosey-goosey going on down below. As soon as you lift this leg, this thing can't move without you actually going off balance. So if I'm staying here, it actually trains not just the balance, but the steadiness and the muscular kind of knowledge that you need to do that. And quite frankly, we spend a lot of time on one leg. We walk all the time. Anytime that we're going through our stuff, we have to lift this leg. We have to put it down, right? We have to know where all of this stuff is, right, at all times. So we have to know where our weight is, where our feet is, where our feet are. All of this also in relation to the opponent. So one-legged stances, low stances, that kind of thing. I mean, they are extreme, right? But they're not unheard of, and they don't necessarily have the detriment that everybody thinks that they do. Anything else? Nothing? Okay. So, yeah, when you look at something that's supposed to be for fighting, right, and you're trying to judge it on whether or not it's good for fighting, there's certain things that a lot of people look for, and they are all true, but a lot of times the judgment is very subjective. So losses of balance, things here, you know, little polished things. There's a lot of things that people dislike stylistically, and little things that performance or this here or that, and it can be really kind of difficult to differentiate form and function. So, you know, questions are always appreciated, but probably one of the things to think about when you are trying to discern, especially if you're trying to learn something, if you're going through something and saying, well, what is this good for? What would I use it for? Is there a situation that I know of that would call for this particular response? And that's how you can start seeing this kind of connection between form and function, because in the end of the day, form follows function, right? I think where people get sidetracked is they forget to identify what the true function is. So you can start with the right idea, but if you say, well, it's supposed to do this function, but it's not. It's supposed to perform this other function, like standing on one leg, right? Is it just a balance exercise? No. there's a lot of exercises that have like multi-layers to this. Again, like I said, it's part of gait training. Right? We can keep our body in alignment right over itself, and then we don't have to worry about falling, getting tripped up, stuff like that. Okay. All right. Did you have a question there, Eric? Oh, now you're muted. You were unmuted before.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
I don't know, for some reason I clicked mute and nothing happens. So I apologize for that. I actually forgot what I was going to say because I kind of got frustrated at this computer. So I will rethink of the question and I will repose it soon.
Okay, very good.
Sorry.
No problem. Okay, yes. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, one thing that occurred to me, because this is, now, obviously this is something I don't know how this applies with weapons, but this is something that sort of relates to my own unarmed martial arts background. One of the things that was always a bit of a point with regard to form and function was that you would see people, in order to sort of try to get more function out of things, they would shorten techniques, you know, either to make them faster or whatever. I mean, how does that work with weapons? I mean, is there an instance where you would maybe not follow a complete arc and shorten a technique rather than doing its full kind of, you know, in a sense, Dulon version?
I think that's going to happen regardless. Your technique when you use it is going to get shorter and shorter and shorter, and that's kind of just the natural progression. You want to try to keep it rather large when you practice, especially by yourself, because it's going to help mimic the stresses that your body is going to be on when it's actually moving against resistance. Because that's one of the things that you're really teaching your body to do when you're dealing weapons work. How do I move this way through resistance and still be effective, still, you know, not fall apart, you know, both you know, physically and strategically, you know, all of that. So that's the thing. Now, and I think it kind of relates to another thing that I can go on a tangent on with that one, is that a lot of people go, well, so you practice in one way, you do these forms and they look one way, but then you admit that you're not going to look like that in fighting. So why do you even do it this way? And you know, why should it look different? You know, is it a case of if it's not on the stage, it's not on the page, or vice versa, or whatever the saying is, you know? As we're going through here, if you're practicing alone, and a lot of people who are kind of fans of our videos are, the difficult thing is you have to try to get to, as I said, you have to replicate a kind of resistance going up against somebody. You don't have a partner to really go up against. Also, you have limited time to train. You want to get in as much stuff as possible, and doing separate things is not always feasible. I can, through a Dulon, I can get done cardio, a little bit of strength training, some movement training, all of this kind of stuff all in one go. I'll do the other things every now and then, but still, I don't need to worry about like periodizing every little day, right? I've got enough stuff that I can work on. I can go through here. So these can be very, very efficient exercises. They don't necessarily have to be standalone. Absolutely, it's going to benefit you to do some strength training, to do all that kind of stuff. But don't make the mistake of just trying to get, you know, faster and make it smaller. It's like in any type of art, when, you know, beginners say, well, how do I create my own style? And it's not so much that you create your own style. If you practice enough and you keep going, you will merely develop your own style. And it's the same thing kind of here. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, and you don't have to specifically kind of go after it. So, yes, you want to get faster, but you don't necessarily want to get faster in the same way that you're going to, with the same strategy directly that you're going to use in fighting, which is you're going to keep the thing really small. That's something that you can totally do. But if you can move through a very large range of motion very, very quickly, you're going to be able to move just as fast or faster through that small range of motion. Now, you also have to train the small range of motion because you have to learn how to put on the brakes. And again, that's another reason why forms and solo practice is important and does offer developmental advantages, because since we don't have things that we're hitting, right, when I come through, I have to stop it. I have to put on the brakes. I have to have some strategy where I'm, so in our system, these are cho, right? So anytime I do a cho, I'm, right, there's a stop. Okay? When I do sai, there's no stop. I come through, right? And this follow through is what allows that excess energy to dissipate, right? This body turn, just like that. So I don't have to worry about kind of throwing my arm out too much. You know, all of those things are trained right in just that one motion, right? We always say go to basics. So I'm not so concerned about forms. If you don't like forms, then don't do forms, right? But if you do your basics and you do, you know, short things, drills, all that kind of thing, I think there's an advantage to doing forms. One of the things about forms, as I said before, and I alluded to this earlier, is that there's a cardio aspect to it, which is very, very much like an engagement, a fight, right? Lasts about 1.5 to 3 minutes, right? These things, and it requires you to keep going at full speed with full power, right? And in order to amp it up a little bit. So in real fighting, if I'm coming through somebody, I might be about that tall, right? If I'm going through with a form, I can go lower, which is going to put a bigger tax on my body, doing essentially the same thing, right? So I can really, really, really work on that endurance, being able to push through that wall, so that when you feel that, if you can't end an engagement fast enough, you know how to push through it. You can get through that exhaustion. You can get through that stuff. If you're training for fighting, it has an enormous benefit if you're training for choreography, because choreographed fights are so much longer than real ones. And I mean, no real fight would go on like that, because people would just keel over. All of that movement for that long, just over and over and over again, it's ridiculous. So if you're going to put that kind of stuff on, if you watch our friends in Italy, the Ludo Sport guys in their Force Clash videos, they had to do all of that live, so they had to be in good shape because, well, there was no cuts, there was no way that they could edit. That's the way they do it in the movies. That's why nobody breaks a sweat, nobody's panting or anything like that, is because they have cuts. If you do it live, which is where most of our community works, at Comic-Cons and such like that, you're going to have a little bit of cardio, because you're going to have to really, really get in there. You'll probably have to go a little bit longer than even a martial artist would have to, at least in this particular milieu. There's obviously levels of competition which would have the same tax. But anyway, so gentlemen, thoughts, questions?
Well, one thing that came to mind from earlier, when you were bringing your arm behind the back, it reminded me of an episode, I can't remember which episode it was, but you were talking about moving with your hands in a space, and reminded me of how you were talking about that previously.
Yes, yeah, yeah. You know, moving. It's a way to move your weapon around your body. I can bring it up high. I can bring it down low. I can try to turn around, bring it behind the back, come up this way, go behind the back again, la 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 la. You know, and the ability to get, it's called proprioception, our ability to kind of locate ourselves in space, and that's, you know, doing this, you know, a lot, and being able to go for an extended period of time and all of that, and make it look smooth and nice and flowing and all of that, not easy, especially without hitting yourself. So, and that's that's a really, really great thing that it trains. Is it does train you how not to hit yourself, and that's always good. Okay, so I think Eric's mute button is still on the fritz. So we got the reverse orbits applicable in the same way as the forward ones. So reverse orbits, meaning, I'm not exactly sure. Do you mean reverse grip orbits? No? Upwards and downwards? Well, see, here's the trick. There are no such things as a reverse orbit. Your orbit is going in one direction. That's the whole point, right? In order to reverse your orbit, you must stop and go this way. Right? A precession is going to continue that orbit. Your relative position to what you're doing is going to give you your subjective idea of where it's going up or down, right? So, you know, it's just like northern and southern hemisphere on Earth here. So, if that, hopefully that answers your question a bit. Okay.
Yeah, could I just sort of tag on to that? Because when I was reading Eric's question, I kind of got an opposite idea. One of the things that seems to be kind of in vogue, that people who aren't so much into the combat aspect of lightsaber, but are more into the pure spinning, seem to be interested in practicing and trying to do, is actually doing the orbital movements backwards. So you're actually trying to do your, for example, the normal downward wield with the behind the back, but actually doing the movement in reverse, as if on a tape, and you were basically watching it backwards. Now, I mean, I'm wondering, is that something that you'd consider to be, in a sense, just kind of because they can, or is there an application to trying that?
No, I don't believe it exists. We're talking about a circle. And a circle is a circle. A circle doesn't have sides. It's going to have a direction, right? So whatever direction, whether you call it reverse, whether you call it forward, is your subjective idea. Now, do you mean an upward one here, and then going behind the back here, just like this? Yeah, that's how you turn around, all right? It's in the, you know, all kinds of stuff. But look, there's, you know, whether I'm doing up this way or up this way, right, nothing changes to my body, right? There are two ways this thing is moving. This, like this, or like this. And their relationship is that of a circle. That's why they're called an orbit. So the orbit goes this way, it comes down this way. So if I'm facing this way, it appears to be going down. If I'm facing this way, it appears to be going up. But there is no distinction between them. They're one fluid motion. What's happening is my body is changing within the within the thing. Now, this motion right here is most often used as, you know, like that, right? So, but we do it in Walking with the Force this way. But it's most often used with a turn like this, like that, and we're going back down like that, right? But it's almost always done in conjunction. like that. If you see the wushu guys do it, they're probably the masters of it. They can do it with a big long spear, and have it going so fast that it's going. It's pretty impressive. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, what would you say would be, especially that kind of funky way of going behind the back like that? What would you say would be a good way of training that to sort of get into being able to do it?
To do what? To just go behind the back?
Yeah, that movement, because I've tried that myself and I couldn't figure it out in my brain.
Well, we do it in Makashi, right there, and then you're turning like this. If you want to stop it here, and then just unwind, that's all you got to do. You see? So I'm going here, I stab, and then I can go like that. All right? Again, start with your major orbits. That will tell you where this is going to be coming. You see? So what I'm doing is I'm coming through like this, and right here I'm going into a little bit of a major orbit. And quite frankly, it'd probably more be akin to a third orbit because I'm going to be rotating right around here. Okay? Like that. Okay? So I'm just going like this, and all I'm doing is turning my back on it. All right? Now I can decide to turn to pull it back out or to stab or what have you. Most of the time you're going to do it because you've caught something here and it pushes you this way, and then you can slip through like that. All right? It's hard to demonstrate without another person. Okay, so that pretty good as far as an answer?
Yeah, sure, that's great, thank you.
So, yeah, I mean, you don't. I mean, there's all kinds of illusions that are happening here, and it all has to do with the fact that our bodies kind of work like a big chain, right? And actually, we call it that, the kinetic chain. So, these are all ways that we can kind of strengthen that chain, right? Get it moving. You also there's a beauty aspect to it, an aesthetic form. That's important as well, because what that does is it makes you not just go through emotion, it makes you really pay attention to it, right? So trying to make it look a certain way, right? The effort of doing that is a really, really amazing mind-body coordination exercise, as well as a neuromuscular exercise. So it has applications, all through the athletic spectrum. Lots of, I shouldn't say lots, a few professional football players I know of have taken martial arts, Chinese martial arts in the past, and found that it has really helped their game because it gives them more agility, it gives them a different type of way of moving, it makes, allows them to move more efficiently. And I think any martial art, properly taught, will do that. I don't think there is any, and obviously that's our whole premise, is that there really is no difference, right? Fencing, wudong, all that kind of stuff, it's all really dictated by the weapon. And right now we've pretty much got a common weapon with all of us right here. So, yeah. Now, if we take that kind of idea and we talk about where it comes from and like kind of how it relates more to regular weapons, right, like a regular sword. Okay, when I am going through here, notice what happens. My edge changes, right? So as I'm here, I flip it around. I'm bringing the true edge over the top here. When I parry down like this, again, bringing that true edge down there. Now this is with, of course, a straight sword, right, a long sword here. But if you had a katana, it would just be the edge. It would, you get a blunt edge, or any type of single edge type of thing, right? So there was a manipulation of the blade that was required, right? So you can parry, and if you see here, here's very small wound guards done, right? Just like that with one of these, because that kind of turning aspect of it becomes very important. for pairing and that kind of thing. Since we don't have that, not as important. But as far as mechanically, what's happening in your body, it's very, very good to know that kind of stuff because, well, especially when you get into going like really, 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 really fast, right? Just be careful, right? Unless, of course, you have an instructor, then you can, this all of our advice here about taking it slow and all that kind of stuff is going on the premise that people are working by themselves. If you have an instructor, you're under some sort of tutelage. You've got professional guidance. There you go. Listen to your teacher. That's what you should do. So, just getting that out of the way. All right. Got about 4 or 5 minutes here. Anybody got anything here to finish up with?
Well, could I just ask you to just, because you just demonstrated the downward orbits with the edged sword. Mm-hmm. How do the up and the fact that you're doing a little bit of adjusting with the hand because you're going downwards? How does that work with the upward orbits?
It's the same way. The idea is that I'm trying to keep that true edge up here. I can parry over here like that. I can cut right there. Same right there. There. So if I'm going up here, right, there, boom, boom. So it's just a matter of, are you hitting below or are you hitting above, right? Is it coming down or is it going up? Very, very, again, keep it simple. This stuff is all very, very inherently very, very simple, right? All right. Did that answer it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was thinking. Was it's just kind of how you're using it, and obviously you're adjusting it to make that work.
Right, right. Now you can do with that upper one, you can do a false edge up like this too, right? So you can do a false edge and then a true edge, and this false edge one is a good parrying strike or a good parrying motion here. Because you could parry and then come straight right underneath, right? Same thing over here. I come like this, flip it around. Boom. So it gives me, again, it gives me a place that I can, do that, that way. And here's a good example. This is a real steel sword that we use for, fighting with and all that. And all of these things I can still do as easily with this as one of the sabers. So that's why these developmental exercises really do kind of exist, so to speak. All right. Okay. Anything else, guys?
If somebody were just to not be able to figure out why you're doing something, what advice would you give them to figure it out?
Skip it and go on to something else. Maybe the lesson will come on. You can ask questions, of course. We'll try to answer them if we can get to them. So there's that. We have the forum going on Facebook. If you have questions, please join us right there. We can put the link in the comments here, or not the comments, the description. But as far as like figuring out what's going on, it's like one thing that you could do if you really wanted to figure out yourself like as a puzzle or something like that, is if you take any motion and you make it very, very slight. So you take something that's really, really big and you make it small, really small. It doesn't have to be fast or anything like that. You make it really small. Sometimes what's gonna happen is you're gonna go, oh, I get it, right? Because there's a particular motion. When I do a cross step and then sink down, my hips turn a particular way. I'm doing that particular motion right now, right? That particular motion, if I do this or if I do this, really what's happening in my body is the muscles are kind of resisting in the same way, right? being able to do that, I can come through just a little bit more, or, you know, depending on where I am in my development or whatever. So, yeah, that would be my advice, is ask questions. Again, if at all possible, try to seek out some sort of in-person instruction. Nothing. If you have somebody who's there working with you, they can really kind of do it. There's limited stuff we can do because we can't see you and all of that. If you come onto the forum, you join the Learners in Exile there, you can share some video with us. But again, even video, it's a little snapshot. It doesn't give us too much. We have to see a whole bunch of it, and there's no real substitute for in-person training. So yeah, there you go. So yeah, if you what you're looking at with form and function, if you look at the forms are going to be much more robust, and they're going to be trying to simulate the physical stresses on the body and the physical feats that will be required of the body within combat. It might necessarily be something that is going to look exactly like that, but it's going to train for eventualities, and it's going to train base skills which are going to transfer directly into fighting and to sparring and stuff like that. So with that, we will end it for this evening. Thank you all for joining us. If you're joining us at home or even after the fact, please share, subscribe. Have a great weekend if you're joining us now, and may the force be with you, and happy sabering.